I hear a lot of talk about, silver's uses and the demand and all the electronics that it's used in and solar panels, and that's all great. But if you actually really look at silver, how it trades, it's really, it's really moves in more or less lockstep with gold.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And I am broadcasting from my Zoom studio, but with my backdrop from the old trading days on the New York Stock Exchange. There's Tony Pensavalle and Fat Frank. That was just what he and everybody else called him. David, it's funny, this was back in 2011. I would talk to these guys about gold and silver. Nobody really wanted to hear it, even when things were getting wild. And things are certainly getting wild in Silverland again these days. So it's a pleasure to have you back on, or actually first time on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here as David Stein of Kuya Silver, and welcome on in.
Well, thanks, Chris. I'm looking forward to whatever we talk about.
Yeah, well, we're going to dig into silver today. I'd also think it would be interesting for folks to hear some of your experience, and maybe that'd be a good place to start. You can let folks know how you got into silver, a bit about your background, and all the things to be doing in the world, how you ended up running a silver company.
Sure, it's actually kind of a good story, I think, because my life has touched on silver 3 times. This is the 3rd time. So first, I actually originally have a technical background, and I did a bachelor's and master's in geology, before I started working. And actually, my thesis project was on a silver project. Okay, so that was number 1, and I got very interested in silver mineralogy and geology or petrology back then. And then I actually jumped into being an analyst. So I basically got right into the capital markets at the bottom of the market back in 2001, actually, and became an analyst, a stock analyst. And I specialized in mining precious metals. I did have a bit of a gold flavor as well coming out of school. And then I guess around 2004 or 5, I started picking up silver companies. So I was, at the time, one of the only analysts that covered any of these junior silver companies. And I believe I was the first guy to pick up coverage of First Majestic when they only had the one mine in Mexico. Fortuna, first guy to pick up coverage of Fortuna, again, when they had their first mine in Peru. And there's a few others that got taken over. And, then I, as my career grew, I ended up covering large cap companies, Barrick, Kinross, etc. Kind of boring, but that's what I was doing. And then I moved into the buy side. So I was doing investments of all basically flavors and commodities, loans, royalties, all sorts of stuff, equity, private equity. And then, and then I went out on my own about 4 years ago, looking for, mining projects that I can invest my own money in first and foremost, and then, see if I could build them into something, and ended up finding the silver project in Peru. So I started Kuya to acquire the mine, and signed an earn-in type deal with the former owners. We've since bought them out, but that's how Kuya got started back in 2017, and I've been basically, it's been my life ever since.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting background, and I'm curious, the thesis paper that got this all started, what did you find out back then? And I think a lot of industry is finding out about now. What did you write about, and what did you find since then?
Well, that particular deposit, is not a bigger deposit. So essentially, my thesis was like the whole thing. I looked at the dating of it, like, so how it formed, the minerals in it, because we're kind of weird. It was quite an interesting. I really enjoyed it. I got to go visit the project. It was in Argentina. Got to go visit it twice when I was basically in my early 20s, which was fun. And it was a great experience to give me kind of some working experience when, frankly, the market was really crappy. It was really tough to get a summer job back then. So I was sort of able to, essentially fake a summer job by going and working on my master's project. I guess what I found out is that, uh, at the end of the day, I learned a lot about what the bigger companies look for when they're making their decisions, their investment decisions on new projects. Because this was actually a Barrick project, and at the end of my thesis, they walked away from it, not because of my work, but because it didn't meet their size criteria. Had some economic challenges at the time. This project, so it didn't work out for them, but it's actually still kicking around. So we'll see if someone new can get it built.
Yeah, it is interesting how sometimes just different time and place and investor group does revive these old projects. Although I'm curious, especially with silver, I think everyone in the world is now seeing that very cyclical, some peaks and valleys. Now that you've been seeing this for such a long time, what would you pass along to someone maybe that's new to silver today, but that you've learned from seeing this cycle over the past 20 plus years?
Well, when I start my conversations about silver, I start it by saying something that, I don't know, to some it might be controversial, but maybe not to you, Chris. You'll understand where I'm coming from. But I hear a lot of when people are talking about silver, guys writing about it on Bloomberg or whatever, I hear a lot of talk about, silver's uses and the demand and all the electronics that it's used in and solar panels. And that's all great. But if you actually really look at silver, how it trades, it's really, it's really moves in more or less lockstep with gold, over the longer term. There's a very, very high correlation. I actually did the analysis myself at one point going back 40 years, and the correlation coefficient of silver and gold is over 80%. So essentially, any move in silver can be mostly explained by the same move in gold. And I think the fundamentals of the two metals they're certainly more alike than not alike. They're very, very, very similar. Now, so, when I think about silver, I think I automatically start thinking about gold. What is the macro for gold, precious metals, and therefore then that sort of drives my view about silver. Silver is a much smaller market. It is therefore more volatile, or gives you more beta. So in a bull market, it's going to go up more. And in a bear market, it goes down more, unfortunately. But we don't like bear markets. So in a bull market, hopefully we're in one now. It appears that we are. So I would expect silver to outperform gold, but they should both do well.
Yeah. And any thoughts on the current gold to silver ratio? Guessing without having calculated recently in the 70s. Yet Keith Neumeyer talks about 8 or 9 to 1 is what's coming out of the ground. What I find interesting is that at least in terms of known above ground investment grade bar form, there's actually less silver just because so much of it is consumed. Where does that leave you on the gold to silver ratio?
Well, I think it always overshoots whatever the equilibrium should be, and I guess we can argue about what it should be. I think it's still a lower number than where we are today, but it'll always overshoot. So we've seen it go, I guess, recently to 30 in the last peak, I think was the ratio. So look, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go there again, or thereabouts. Keith is right. And there are some other kind of interesting metrics. I know that I think that the annual silver market in dollars is about 1/8 the size of gold. So that's an indication of the market size. Look, supply demand is not irrelevant. I just think, investment demand is the most important metric that you need to use. But you're on the usage of silver side, it is kind of interesting that there are a lot of uses for silver, which you cannot, it's uneconomic to recycle the silver from. That's not as much the case with gold. So, and obviously, I would be very surprised if, this like sort of micrometer thin silver paint that's going on solar panels now is worth, number one, solar panels last decades. Number two, is it worth recovering the silver? Not right now, it probably isn't. So I think that's a lot of silver that's being taken out of the market right now, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think we could see silver definitely on the ratio go a lot higher.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a good case to be made for that. Another question that I wonder, especially because you deal with investors on a daily basis, I know there's a lot of people wondering, is this going to be the same as 2016, 2011, where there's a spike up and then the prices come back down? Do you still sense that people are a little hesitant to jump in at this point?
Yeah, the old dead cat bounce. I think that this rally has now been long enough that it's, from my perspective, it's shown that it's not the same as 2016. So that time factor is definitely playing to our benefit. Now, that being said, I still don't, find much unbridled enthusiasm for precious metals. It's definitely improving, but going back to my analyst days, I basically was, I had a front row seat for the entire bull market. And to me, this is more like 2003 or 4 than 2009, 10, 11 when we had the sort of the top. So I think the people who are in the industry who are all sort of really smart about the mining sector, who follow the mining sector, that's their livelihood. A lot of those people are they've been buying precious metal stocks, and they're getting excited. But I don't think the generalists or a lot of the the retail are looking at silver yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you also mentioned earlier how generally with silver, yes, you have that industrial demand, but at least in the past, what has really moved the price in the extreme fashion we've seen is when the investment demand kicks in. And sounds like you're saying that it still feels early in the game there.
Yeah, that's my opinion. Yeah, so talking to investors, I definitely see, a long way to go if we repeat, the same kind of pattern that we did, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and it is funny thinking about the difference, even versus a couple of months ago when you had silver rallying up to $29, and it was becoming cool for a while, and they're like, whoa, what is this? And then I don't know, maybe that's Wall Street nature, or maybe some degree human nature, where we see it's like you already have silver that's something a little moody and cyclical by nature, and then you look at today's investment culture, and it just makes you wonder. Especially, we have a bullion dealer who comes on every week, and there's not any slowing down of people purchasing physical silver. And I just wonder how that, at some point, if that catches up, where you see the growing demand in industry, you see the growing demand in retail, you see supply get shut down, and that's where I think a lot of us wonder, how else could this possibly end?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think at some point, you break through all that demand, and then you in my career, there's been times where it's been getting physical silver has been extremely difficult or impossible for certain periods of time, as weeks maybe at a time. And, that type of thing can totally happen again. That happens when obviously there's a lot of physical demand, and, maybe we're not quite there yet, but, it seems like that could happen again and drive the price up.
Yeah, although fortunately, one of the things I'm excited to touch on today, you're running Kuya Silver, so it's not a hedge fund. You're running a business where you have to plan for a whole bunch of different people and needs in the world, how to keep things running. And I find often as investors, we can take something from that mindset. So how do you go about hedging out that volatility in your role?
Well, I think you know, I think the key risks for, for a mining company, especially at our stage, is to be well financed. So, if you're well financed, you can ride out the ups and downs of the metal price. And I mean, at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to be in the position where we can be producing silver profitably from our mine. And then if we do that, then our shares will be worth way more than they are today. That's the basic thesis of all, sort of pre-production mining or junior mining companies. And in that sense, we're no different. I mean, I obviously think our story is unique in a lot of ways, and we're a very exciting company. But at the end of the day, if we deliver on that, then everybody's going to make a lot of money, and that's the main risk that I need to hedge against.
Yeah, and David, could you give folks an overview of exactly where you are in the stage of the whole process, so they know exactly what kind of profile they're looking at?
Sure. So we're actually a relatively advanced stage junior because we bought a formerly producing mine, and instead of building a new mine, we're just putting it back into production. Now we do want to make some improvements to it before we put it back into production, and that's largely what me and the team will be working on this year. So we're going to put a plant at site. There's never been a processing plant here. They've always trucked their ore to other mines to have it processed. And so we're building a plant, and then we're going to expand underground as well. And so the combination of those two jobs, the underground expansion and the plant, will result in about a 4-fold increase in production compared to what the private Peruvian guys were doing 4 or 5 years ago. And obviously that scale makes it a lot more profitable as well. So that's what we're doing. And, we obviously having the mine there already gives us a huge advantage in terms of timing. So we're well on the way. We have our EAA done. That was actually completed last August. That's a major permit that can take, upwards of 2 years to get. So we got it. And, now we're looking at basically finalizing engineering and doing the construction for the rest of the year.
Okay, so basically the construction is the next key step that you're looking at now.
Yeah. We'll probably, mid-year Q2, we should be starting construction, and there'll be a number of, sort of announcements leading up to that.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit about the jurisdiction?
Yeah, well, we're in Peru. Peru is, it's a very prolific mining country already. And mining is their biggest, export, I believe, metals and commodities, so or hard commodities. So, very, very good place from that perspective. As an investor, keep in mind, I sort of came into this first and foremost as an investor. What I liked about Peru and operating there is that you've got the whole gamut of companies, not just, a few, junior companies, but you've got everyone from the biggest mining companies in the world, to private, companies that you never heard of, and everybody in between. So mid tiers and small caps and everybody. So you've got a whole really good kind of, I guess, ecosystem of mining companies there who are, so you don't have to really blaze any trails when it comes to permits, CSR, government, dealing with the government laws, that kind of thing. That to me tends to be a lot more stable than, a country where there's only a handful of 3 or 4 companies in there. That worries me more. So that's been great. Peru is, much like Canada and the United States, it's a big country where, depending on where you are, you can have different issues. We're very fortunate, and we're sort of in the center part of the country where it is really mining country. There's dozens of mines around us within a 50 or 100 kilometer radius of our mine. And really, it's really just mining friendly, and it's part of the culture there. Other parts of the country, maybe not so much, but definitely where we are, it's great. And, and we've had, we've been quite successful so far, dealing with the various levels of government and getting permits and getting things done that we need, in order to develop the project. I guess the last thing I'll say about Peru is politically, some people who, may have noticed that they went through 3 different presidents in like a few weeks, back in our fall in the late 2020. And, the president of Peru is kind of a weaker position, I guess, than some other, countries, no. Where so they can kind of do that. And through all that, what would on the surface perceive as turmoil, you didn't really affect the mining industry whatsoever. And in fact, the fact that Peru does have a very sort of fragmented Congress with a lot of smaller political parties, and nobody really wields the stick. So what it ends up meaning is that the country is very stable, because you don't have either a big left or right wing party coming in and changing all the laws overnight, like you've seen that happen in some other smaller Latin American countries over the years. But in Peru, that's, I won't say it's impossible, but very unlikely to happen.
Yeah, and I suppose the tax revenue that comes from the result of the business being successful is always a powerful motivator to find some solution. And obviously having someone who is able to negotiate that with the government, which again is why I think it's helpful for people to meet you today. One other thing I know that people are always interested to hear, can you comment on the share structure and let folks know what they're looking at there?
Yeah, we have about 38 million shares outstanding, and actually really simple share structure. And yeah, I think some of those warrants have been exercised. I think we have maybe 1 million warrants and about 1 million options. Well, that's the right option number. But yeah, so very simple share structure, really, really nice, plain vanilla kind of company in that sense, which I like, and I tried to set that up deliberately. And very high management ownership. Largest shareholder is me. And between myself and some of the other officers and directors, we have about 29% ownership of the company. And and then we've got some other great large shareholders. The former owners of the mine are a big shareholder. They got shares as part of their compensation for when we bought the mine, so they're sitting at about 10%. And then we've got some institutional shareholders as well. Commodity Capital, Eric Sprott, Crestcat, some of our larger institutional shareholders. So yeah, very I'm very happy with the share structure so far.
Well, I appreciate that, and appreciate all the things that you're doing there. There's not a ton of silver companies out there, and it's nice to come and join us today and share a little bit about what you're doing. David, before we wrap up, anything else that people would be well served to know, whether about the company or silver in general, and as well, maybe you can mention the website one more time.
Sure. So our website is kuyasilver.com, www.kuyasilver.com. That's our name. And yeah, there you got, Chris has got it. So so that's the website. Look, I think one of the things that I really liked about basically getting into this project, I can't necessarily say that I had this great vision that I wanted, that I was going to build a silver mining company. But when I found this asset, I realized that this was very similar in a lot of ways to the first mining asset of companies like First Majestic, even Pan American going back to the mid 90s. They started the same way, with a relatively small but high grade, low capex project that you could build quickly, get into production. They got the sort of the market following with that, and with that market following, that gives you better access to capital. Then you can go and expand. You can buy another mine and do all those things with a higher valuation. And really, that's really a great way to build a silver mining company. Mother Nature does not, tend to put these giant silver deposits all around. They're extremely rare. They're often very difficult to build, either for environmental, CSR, or technical reasons. But these high-grade veins, like what we have at Bethania, like what First Majestic started with in Mexico, is those are things that are relatively geologically low risk. They're cheap to put into production, and you can produce 2, 3, 4, 5 million ounces of silver with those, and then go on to the next one. So I think it's a great business model. I'm really excited about getting into that. And the last thing I'll say is that for those who want to invest in silver mining companies, whether you invest in Kuya or not, one thing to keep in mind is that silver almost always comes with byproducts. So when you are looking at whatever company, really look at their revenue and where it's coming from, because a lot of companies that you think are silver companies actually aren't. They're producing mostly gold or something else. And we are going to be, a true silver mining company. Somewhere between 60 and 70% of our revenue is going to be coming from silver once we restart the mine. And I think when investors do get really excited about silver, they're going to want a primary real silver mining company, which we're not the only one, but there are very few of them out there. So we're very excited to be joining that elite group.
Well, I'm darn excited about it too. And it's nice to have another good company in there. I appreciate your perspective, the way you look at things and approach things, because if you have a good asset and you have someone who knows what to do with it, good mix. So David, look forward to following your success, and thanks again for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity.